Welcome to the Jockey Club, a podcast looking at the movie Let It Ride, one scene at a time. My name is Dan Delgado, and we're at historic Hialeah Park where one man is having the best day of his life.
I'm having a good day.
So come on in and hang out while we talk about this day and the greatest movie of all time, Let It Ride. Don't worry about that guy at the door. I've got you covered. You can even
take my seat to the Jockey Club.
Welcome back to the Jockey Club. My name is Dan Delgado. We are up to episode 18, which means that we are doing the 18th scene of Let It Ride. And really, and go ahead, say it along with me, it's the 18th scene according to me. This is the scene where Trotter runs into Lufkin and Johnny Casino at the Jockey Club. With me to discuss this scene is Dr. Sean Munger. And the good doctor recently wrapped up his own movie podcast, Green Screen, which took a look at movies from an environmental standpoint. There's even an episode with me on it. And Sean was also an interview subject on my film history podcast, The Industry. And there will be links to both of those in the show description. And a quick reminder, for those of you who need it, we do have merch. Yes, indeed. Maybe you cannot live without a Jockey Club t-shirt or mug, and now your prayers have been answered. Again, there will be a link in the show description for you to get yours. And if you're playing along at home, this is going to be from minute 48:09 to 49:35. So now, let's head on up to my usual table at the Jockey Club to discuss this, the 18th scene of Let It Ride. All right, so now should I feel as though I should address you as doctor. Is that all right?
Oh, you don't have to do that. You may if you want to.
Okay. I don't run across a lot of doctors unless they're examining me, so it always feels like the proper thing to do. All right, so as always with somebody who is doing this for the first time with me, first question is going to be, can you tell me the first time it was that you saw Let It Ride? And what was your initial reaction to it, if you have such a memory?
So, yeah, I do remember seeing Let It Ride. I saw it in the theater in 1989.
Oh, you know what? That just warms my heart. You know, I did as well, and I feel like we're in such a minority. It's such a small number of us. It's wonderful to talk to somebody else.
Yeah, it really came and went very very quickly.
It really did. So how old were you at the time before you continue? I'm just curious.
I was 17.
Oh, okay. Very good.
Yeah, and this was shortly after, I put it somewhere in that summer of 1989, and just looking at the stats on it, I see the release date is August 18th, and so that was shortly after my family moved to the Pacific Northwest, to the Portland, Oregon area. So there was a lot happening with me that summer. I do remember seeing it, and I know I went with my parents, and this was, I don't recall us really thinking much about it. and this was kind of one of, I think this era, and I know you mentioned something to this effect in some previous episodes, but film was really changing in this era, and like how people related to movies was changing, I think largely because it was the VHS era, basically the home video era. And throughout much of the history of movies, it had been like, you make a decision, okay, we're going to go to the movies today. And you would decide, okay, what are we going to see? And then like later on, that decision became a lot more rare for many people. It was more like, well, we're going to go see, X movie. And so this was one of the last times that I remember where it's like, hey, let's go to the movies, and okay, well, let's look for something to see. So I recall seeing, not only do I remember seeing it in the theater, but I recall seeing like a commercial or something for it.
Oh, sure.
And I know it wasn't heavily promoted, but I do remember seeing a commercial about it, and didn't before I knew that I was going to go see it, and it didn't make that much of an impression on me. But once we were going to see it, I know that I thought as we were walking into the theater, I didn't really have high hopes for it, and I thought it was going to be about, I don't know why I thought this, but I thought it was going to be about like a mafia type comedy, like the mob is chasing Richard Dreyfuss because he ripped them off in a horse race, or like that's I don't know why I got that in my head, but that's what I thought it was going to be.
It sounds like a good movie though.
Yeah, and yeah, but also that kind of plot had been done to death in the late 80s.
Oh my God, absolutely, of course.
So I guess I didn't, and even at 17, I had seen enough of those kinds of movies that I'm like, oh God, here's another one. So, and we might have chosen this one because my mother liked Richard Dreyfuss, and I did too, and we had seen a couple of his movies, and so I'm sure that was really the only draw. But I remember being sort of, I didn't enjoy it, but I also didn't not enjoy it. It just kind of was in that weird middle zone.
Okay, I gotcha. Right.
So, I remember being puzzled by the end of it. And I know this has come up on your podcast before, where the way the setup is and everything, it particularly the gambling aspects, it makes you think that the resolution of the movie is going to have something to do with the gambling issue. It's like he's either going to, I remember I was surprised that he won at the end, because I thought the setup was going to be he's going to lose everything and decide that he loves his wife, and the final scene will be, oh honey, I'm never gambling again, and then they walk off into the sunset. That would make
perfect sense. That is what happens in, I don't know, pretty much every other gambling movie, right? Is that right? You have this sort of reckoning at all of the vice that you've been enjoying for 90 minutes. Now in minute 91, it's going to go all to hell. So that makes perfect sense. Sure. Yeah.
So I remember being kind of puzzled by that. Again, I didn't dislike it, but it didn't make that much of an impression. And so then it just sort of faded from my consciousness for a long time. And then actually, since you started doing this podcast, I don't know when you started, it was a couple of months ago, I guess. But yeah, Cody, my husband, and I decided, you know what, I think I want to see that. It's like, he says it's the greatest movie of all time, and I don't understand why he says that, but
I do
give
say
it a shot.
That's correct.
So I went looking for this film, and it's, I don't know where you got it, but I could not find it on streaming.
Oh yeah, I don't think it's streaming anywhere, but I do have a DVD, like a special edition Australian print DVD that came out last year that you can get off Amazon. But yeah, I'm pretty sure it is not streaming. It does pop up on streaming once in a while though. Yeah. Well, I had to get it. This is, again, calling me doctor, this is a little academic trick, but I had to get it from Interlibrary Loan. I had to get the DVD from Interlibrary Loan. So, which I mean, I do stuff like that all the time, but it's usually academic books. But yeah, so I was putting in my Interlibrary Loan order, and I'm like, I just type "Let It Ride" into the the search criteria. So hang on a second, I need to understand this. What is Interlibrary Loan? What does that actually mean, especially for me and anybody else who might not know what you're referring to?
Okay, Interlibrary Loan is a service, actually really good program that is like a voluntary program that many libraries across really the world participate in, where usually, like, if you have a library card for your local library, you can access the system online and place, if your library doesn't have something, you can place an order and it'll go through the system. They'll find a library, your library will find a participating library that has what you want and is willing to send it to your library. So you just go and check it out. But this works really well, especially for academics, and especially for academics who aren't attached to a university anymore. It's like, I got my degree, and they usually give you, like, you have all these library privileges where you can do research and access their databases and all this kind of stuff. But when you leave, they give you a grace period that's, I think, like 18 months or 2 years or whatever. Then they shut off your library access. And so if you're not working at another university by that time, it makes it really hard to do research because you're locked out of all the databases and you can't get books.
Okay.
So Interlibrary Loan is the way you beat that, basically. And if you put your request in and you know how to search for it and where to look for it, you can get pretty much anything you want.
Including goofy horse racing movies from the 1980s.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So I typed in Let It Ride and, DVD, and it's like, oh yeah, the public library of Sheboygan, Wisconsin has like one copy, something like that. And so
I love
so
this story. Oh my God. Okay. So because of this podcast, you went ahead and put in this interlibrary request to get it from some other library in some other part of the country to send it to you so you can watch it. All right. So now I'm going to ask you the obvious follow-up question, Doctor, and that is, upon recent review, did it make more of an impression on you? Is it closer to being the greatest movie ever made than it was before?
I'll say it's closer. How much closer, I don't know, but I did find it enjoyable, and we actually thought it was pretty good. It was funny and it was quirky. And I guess that's what I liked about it. This watching it this recent time is that it does kind of defy your expectations.
Yeah, it's very subversive, I would say. That's how I kind of look at it.
And that was very hard to pull off in the late 80s, especially for something like this, which was going to be, a light comedy that I'm assuming the economic proposition of the studio was, hey, let's get Richard Dreyfuss to do it and we'll market it as a slapstick comedy with him. And that's going to be the draw. And then you get this weird movie that has these strange undertones, and it's sort of about gambling, but sort of not. And so this is the kind of movie that would be more readily made today on like A24 or some kind of streaming service, that it would just be one of these just very quirky, like a starter film from some young director or something.
Yeah, I would love to have seen whatever the initial reaction from Paramount was whenever they watched this movie. I can't imagine they cared for it that much, especially based on the fact that it sort of threw it out on a weekend in August that had like 5 other releases, sort of at the end of a summer that still has a ton of blockbusters still dominating the box office. It's just sort of like, we'll just throw this out here. Let's just get it off the schedule.
Yeah, and when I think about the original time I saw it, I do kind of put it in the context of those other movies that were out there at that time, because and I went to the movies a lot that summer. And there was Do the Right Thing, and there was Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, which I just did a video on for my YouTube channel, by the way. There was License to Kill, which is my favorite James Bond, one of my favorite James Bond movies. So there was a lot of good stuff. In the theaters.
Yeah, that was
summer.
That was a killer summer. That was unquestionably a killer summer. You had
and then it was starting to kind of slope off at this point in the summer where there weren't that many big must-see blockbusters out anymore. And that's when they kind of slipped it into the schedule, it seems like.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, it was almost like it used to be that mid to late August was like a dumping ground, kind of like January used to be also, where studios would take movies that they don't really care about, they don't think they are going to perform, and they just kind of dump it out. All right, we've already invested this much, put it out, whatever happens to it. So anyway, let's get on to our scene. This is scene number 18, according, in my count, which may not be accurate. It's a fairly quick scene. This is actually a pretty short scene. It's only a little over a minute long, but I do think it's kind of key. We learn a couple of things, and we meet a couple of guys. Right. The first time we saw Lufkin and Johnny Casino is in the previous scene, but here's the first time that we're actually hearing them talk and sort of learning who they are, right? In the previous scene, Trotter sees them and kind of growls at them while he's on the phone. But now we kind of learn who they are, right? As he returns to his table from the phone call, and he wants to go back to his Jockey Club existence of putting on airs and schmoozing the two ladies and being the fun, cool guy for the moment that perhaps he's always wanted to be. But it really kind of quickly changes, right? As these guys show up and they're sitting right at the table next to him. And the way Richard Edson, Johnny Casino, delivers his lines, Like, I don't know. There's something wonderful about it. It's almost like he's singing them in a way, right? There's some sort of musical aspect. He says, I thought we'd find you at that dump across the street where all the pigs wallow, you know? And Dreyfus is honestly one of my favorite Trotter lines is here, where he looks at his shoes and he asks them, nice shoes, where did you buy them? A carpet sale.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting scene. It's not that long, and what I kind of noticed from it is sort of Trotter. It sort of highlights he's kind of incongruous in this environment. It's like the people are tolerating him, but it's clear they don't really want him there. I'm not sure. It's like he understands it on some level, but on another level, he's really trying to sort of schmooze and fit in.
Yes,
and he thinks that he deserves to be there by the fact that he's won all these races, and that's not really what's going on. And I'm not sure that he gets it. So I found that kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I also found it interesting how bored people look. Like, especially the Michelle Phillips character is just kind of lounging around in a chair and wishes she was somewhere else.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Even like the rich guys don't look like they're really happy to be there. So yeah. I noticed that too.
Yeah, a lot of them just look like they're existing. Yeah, they just look like they've been propped up there for a very long time. Yeah, and it is almost like when Lufkin and Johnny Casino show up, it does feel like it's his former existence, right? His past that he's maybe trying to escape, that's coming back to remind him who he really is. Because Johnny Casino says, "Let me throw this bum out the window." That's what he says to Lufkin, referring to Trotter. Like, I would love to kill this guy. I hate this guy so much because, it's such an indicator of what their relationship to him must be as the degenerate gambler that he has been prior. When you see him as a loser, as we know he must be before this movie starts, right?
Right.
So,
yeah.
In the meantime, Lufkin collects a check from Bernie, Alan Garfield, who's sitting there, and it's very cordial. Next week, it's me giving you this back. So, clearly, Bernie's there. He's betting on the horses. So this check is for something else. What do you think he's betting on that he's giving him a check for?
Oh, who knows? I suppose that's part of the sort of the deep headcanon of the movie that I don't think I've really considered.
Yeah, maybe it's football, but maybe it's bullfighting. It could be anything, right? Could be anything that these guys are betting on. And then we kind of get to, I guess, the meat of what this scene is, where Lufkin tells Trotter, hey, we're looking for Looney. He bet a nickel on the Packers, which for those of you who are not degenerate gamblers, it's $500. And now, you've seen Looney, Sean. I've seen Looney. There's no way that guy has $500.
Yeah.
Right? He doesn't.
Right.
Like if you sold everything in his apartment, you probably couldn't get $500, would be my guess. So how is it that these guys take the bet? Like, they know him. They know him well, right? These bookies. So how do they take this bet without, you're going to have to just end up breaking his legs?
Yeah, it kind of doesn't really make much sense. And it's also sort of curious why they're leaning on Trotter, as if he's going to force him to pay. I don't understand that either.
Well, I think they can't find Looney, and Looney and Trotter are generally together, except for this movie. So maybe they're just thinking that's what's going to happen here. And so Looney owes over $800, which by the way, in today's world, that would be $1,911.46.
Wow.
Yeah, right?
That's quite a bit.
And so this movie doesn't exactly have regular antagonists, but these guys are maybe the closest physical representation that we're getting. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that and the Alan Garfield character, who's kind of more of like a social antagonist than a direct one. But and I guess this is where I suppose the movie comes the closest to that initial idea that I had, that it's going to be about guys chasing Richard Dreyfuss because he cheated them or something. And like, Richard Edson would be one of the mafia thugs. Again, that's what I thought it was. And maybe there was I would be curious. I haven't seen the trailer and I have no idea, of course, what commercial I watched way back in 1989. But I wonder if there were a couple of seconds of this scene in that trailer that may have given me that impression. I have no idea.
It could be. If it makes you feel any better, I remember distinctly seeing ads for this on television, one or two. I still didn't really know what the movie was about until I saw it. I just knew, I didn't even know. I don't know. It's called Let It Ride. I don't know. There's upbeat music in the trailer, and Richard Dreyfuss is in it, and that's the extent of my knowledge.
Yeah, and I wonder to the extent that the studio, like you said, that they probably weren't very happy with what they eventually got, and maybe that was a conscious choice, was to sort of sandbag as much information about the movie as possible in the promotion and just limit it to exactly what you just said. Like, okay, it's a comedy with Richard Dreyfuss, and they figured that was the only reason why anybody was going to show up to this movie. And so that's what they were pushing, and they deliberately made everything else very opaque.
That's not a bad theory.
Yeah, it could be what they were doing. And like if this was like a funny, sort of mafia movie, it's like Richard Edson might be one of the guys you would cast as one of the goofy hitmen. I mean, so it sort of makes sense.
Oh yeah, he absolutely would. And at the end of this scene where he takes his little, I don't know, his little book, and he paps Dreyfuss in the back of the head. He's pay up or else. Like, it's so they're being as friendly as possible as they can in delivering this message, but it feels like such a not very thinly veiled threat, right? Like, it feels like, yeah, pay up. It feels like, well, pay up or else someone's getting hurt, and it's probably Looney, and maybe it's you.
Yeah. Like, it seems like they're like kind of telling Trotter that, like, if we can't find Looney, we're gonna come get you for it. And I mean, that's why they made the bet. It's just like, well, we know he won't pay, but we can shake down somebody else.
Exactly.
And now that he's started winning races, he's now an attractive target.
I mean, really, the actual end of the scene, Trotter says, well, I don't think I'll be seeing Mr. Looney. And I love how he says that, Mr. Looney, because I can only imagine what everybody else at the other tables are thinking when they're talking about a guy whose name is Looney, right? So maybe Trotter's trying to save a little bit of face by calling him Mr. Looney just before he says, I don't think I'll be seeing Mr. Looney anytime soon. And then he gets up and leaves in the most obvious, I'm going to go and warn him right now, right?
And then isn't the next scene that, I don't want to spoil anything, but isn't that where he finds up at the blood bank?
There's nothing to spoil.
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Anything is open. All the scenes are open, really. I mean, we're focused on this one, but whatever. Yeah, it's right after
he goes
this.
To the bar next, and then they tell him that he's at the blood bank.
That's exactly right. Yep, he's at the blood bank, and I do love that at the blood bank when he sees him. This is just perfect behavior. He's giving the blood with the racing form in one hand and a cigarette in the other hand. That is all-star level degeneracy right there.
Yeah, and I loved David Johansen's performance in this whole movie. It's very funny. His performance in Scrooged, I'm sure, is what got him this gig.
Oh, man, that's right. He's great in Scrooged, the taxi driver.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, the Ghost of Christmas Past, or Christmas. I don't know which one it was, but I think he's in it.
I think. Oh man, now you've got me thinking. I think he's past. He's the first one, right?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, he is.
Yeah, he's the first one. Yep. So there you go. All right. Well, we've reached the end of the scene. You got anything else that you want to toss out here, Doctor?
Well, not really. I mean, I find this whole project very interesting. I mean, I can't say that I'm a huge fan of the movie, but your show's been very interesting. I do like the fact there were a couple of episodes ago.
Yeah.
The subject of Apprenticeship of Duddy Kravitz came up.
Oh, sure.
And I'm glad that got mentioned, because that's sort of the sleeper in Dreyfuss's career. And it really deserves to be more well known because it's one of his best performances and one of really his better movies. I absolutely love that film. That's another one that's super hard to find. I think I had to get that by interlibrary loan also.
Oh yeah, yeah. That is definitely
but-
a movie that's kind of it's sort of just gone by the wayside. And unless
Yeah.
you're a big Dreyfuss guy, you probably don't even know that one. Know that one.
Yeah, and it's like that film is based on a famous novel that was written by a Jewish author in Montreal who like kind of was writing in that era, the 40s and 50s, and so it was kind of like a sort of a depiction of that community, and it's just it's a community you don't expect to see often in movies, but I think they did it really well, and there's like Dreyfuss has he really does have a range because he can do slapstick stuff like this, or he can do the kind of more introspective sort of social comedy like Duddy Kravitz, and he's really amazing, and clearly in Let It Ride, I think he's obviously the best performer in it, and I think he knows it too. But it's interesting to watch him work in his various roles. So I thought that was great that you mentioned that.
Have you seen The Big Fix? That's another kind of under the radar Dreyfuss film where he's
I saw it years ago. I don't really remember anything about it.
It's a detective movie. He's a detective. It's from like 78, I'm pretty sure. But put that on your interlibrary request would be my recommendation to you. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Jockey Club. This episode was hosted and produced by me, Dan Delgado. Thank you to my guest, Dr. Sean Munger. Look for Sean's podcast, Green Screen, wherever you got this podcast from. There will be a link to it in the show description just to help you out. You can also find a link to the video Sean mentioned that he made about Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade in there as well. Our theme music is from Epidemic Sound. Our cover art is by Sean Labrie. If you enjoyed this episode, and I certainly hope that you did, then I hope that you could find it somewhere deep in your heart to give this show a 5-star rating. That's right. If you could head on over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or maybe whatever podcast player you're on and rate the show, maybe give it a review. Well, I don't know that it's going to necessarily help anything out, but it will make me feel so much better. You can contact me through email, dan@moviemaker.com, on Twitter, where I am constantly it's @_Dan_Delgado, or even better, I am on the Repod app, which is a great way to not only to listen to podcasts, but to interact with podcast hosts like myself. Find it in your app store, come on by and say hello. This has been Dan Delgado for the Jockey Club. And remember, sometimes you could be walking around lucky and not even know it.